Coming up on The World Today. Russia's president says U.S. ignored its security concerns over Ukraine. Well, U.S. President Biden warns Russia may invade Ukraine next month. Plus, ECOWAS holds extraordinary summit, suspends Burkina Faso in response to military coup. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. We begin with the escalating situation in Ukraine amid fears Russia could invade the country. Russian President Vladimir Putin has told his French counterpart that the West has ignored its security concerns. The U.S. rejected a key Moscow demand that NATO rule out Ukraine, joining the defense alliance, but insisted it was offering Russia a diplomatic path. Russia denies its planning an attack on Ukraine and says it does not want war. U.S. President Joe Biden, however, thinks otherwise. He warns that there is a distinct possibility Russia might invade Ukraine next month. He made the comment during a phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, where he reaffirmed Washington's readiness to respond decisively if Russia invades. Mr. Biden also told his Ukrainian counterpart that the United States is exploring additional macroeconomic support to help Ukraine's economy. Well, shortly after those earlier comments were mentioned by the Russian president, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the alliance is ready to increase its presence in Eastern Europe to demonstrate its resolve. Ms. Stoltenberg claims Russia is deploying thousands of combat-ready troops and missile systems into Belarus, which also borders Ukraine.
Of course, we are also ready to step up, as we actually now do, our military presence in the eastern part of the alliance to prevent any misunderstanding or room for miscalculation about NATO's ability and readiness to protect and defend all allies. So we are doing three things. We are sending a message of sanctions, high price to pay. We are supporting Ukraine, and we are, of course, also conveying absolute unwavering commitment to all NATO allies. Well, there's no certainty about the Russian plans, and maybe they have not made any final decision. From the NATO side, we are ready to engage in political dialogue, but we're also ready to respond if Russia chooses an armed conflict, confrontation. So we are ready for both options. We are working hard for the best, peaceful political solution, but we're also prepared for the worst.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian law enforcers have organized emergency drills after a series of earth bomb alerts this year forced the evacuation of schools in the capital, Kyiv, and other cities.
How much explosive can this fluffy toy owl hold? This is what this Ukrainian bomb disposal serviceman asked astonished children in an emergency drill class in Kyiv. Law enforcement officers organized the training after a series of Hawks bomb alerts forced evacuation of schools in the capital and other cities.
Everyone should understand the mechanics of possible reactions in the case of a situation. We are also teaching the difference between explosives and pyrotechnics.
The servicemen show the class video clips of explosions and scattering shrapnel, artillery and mortar shells, grenades and mines, as well as improvised explosive devices, some resembling a box of chocolate and a mobile phone case. Then a siren went off at the school. Everyone rose to evacuate. All of this is a stark reminder of the peculiar state Ukraine currently finds itself, neither at war nor at peace. Kiev blames the hawks alert on Russia already waging what they call a hybrid war against its former Soviet satellite. Ukraine Security Service says they saw anxiety and panic among the public. It had recorded more than 300 bomb threats so far this year, compared to 1,100 for the whole of 2021. Kiev says Russia is threatening a full-blown invasion by amassing more than 100,000 troops near the border. Moscow denies this. Russian officials have blamed Ukraine for a similar series of bomb hoaxes that have forced schools, shopping centers, and kindergartens to evacuate tens of thousands of people. The West has threatened Russia with severe sanctions if it invades Ukraine. NATO has put its forces on standby. As everyone waits to see what happens next, students at this school prepare, lining up in the snow-covered schoolyard in Kiev for the drills.
Our security analyst Chidi Nwaunu joins us now for more on the escalating situation on the Ukraine-Russian border. Mr. Chidi, the U.S. is predicting Russia could invade anytime soon. But with the current situation on ground, threats of economic sanctions and NATO and Western allies deploying troops to support Ukraine, how likely, or should I say imminent, is this threat of an invasion?
The actual chance of an invasion is quite low. And when we talk about an invasion, we're talking about a full-scale military operation with Russian troops crossing the Ukrainian border. What's more likely to happen is what's happening now. A lot of provocations, cyber attacks, bomb threats, possibly some actual incidents, so terror attacks, bomb attacks, kidnappings, sniping, shootings, just things that will cause disruptions to the normal daily life of the Ukrainians and impose pressure on them, and also try and influence decision makers towards acceding to Russia's demands. But the likelihood of an actual invasion is quite low.
Well, Russia has repeatedly denied that it's planning to invade. In fact, today it said again that it doesn't want war. So what other possible explanation could there be for the over 100,000 troops on the border?
The utility of placing all those troops on the Ukrainian border is exactly what's happening now. It creates this immediacy and this pressure on all the actors, from the United States to NATO to Ukraine, to engage with Russia on Russia's terms. It also gives them, a multiplicity of options. So whilst I've said the likelihood of an invasion is quite low, in reality, they still have the option of an invasion, and they have all the equipment and all the resources that they need to conduct it. So when they threaten military technical, responses, they have demonstrated and have made sure the entire world knows that they have the ability to carry out those responses. And also, if, for example, Ukraine decides to move against the rebels in Donbass, the Russians have the ability to intervene. If the rebels in Donbass decide to, attack Ukrainian forces, the Russians sitting on their border means the Ukrainians can't devote their full armed forces to, combating the Donbass militias. So it inhibits their freedom of movement or freedom of action as well. So it's a negotiating tactic. It's a new move on the chessboard, as it were.
Well, no one really wants war, but if it does come down to it, how far do you think Ukraine's allies are willing to go for the country?
It's very unlikely that any other country would engage in the fight in Ukraine. Nobody wants to expand this war. Nobody wants this war on their border. It suits everybody's purpose for this to be fought out in Ukraine, with the Russians and the Ukrainians on either side. What would be likely to happen is a lot of moral support, a lot of financial support, weapons, possibly a few volunteers going over to join, but nothing formal. The risk of escalation is quite high, and there is a much longer memory in Eastern and Central Europe and in the Baltics and the Balkans of war than there is in Western Europe, and nobody wants a repetition of that.
And in the event of an invasion, what implications does this have for the wider region?
So as I've said earlier, the likelihood of an invasion is quite low, but there's two elements to it. If there is an invasion, then it's likely to be quite difficult for the Russians. I mean, they'll be very likely to have limited objectives, which they'll most likely succeed in taking. But the Ukrainians have most likely war gamed for this and will be looking to cause them difficulties, inflict high casualties, capture equipment, capture personnel, and embarrass the Russians as much as possible, make the cost for them as high as possible. It will clearly be devastating for Ukraine and the Ukrainians because this war is being fought on their territory. It's taking their soldiers, their time, their money, and their infrastructure will be destroyed. Other factors could be that the Russians could decide to go for a full-scale operation and, not just fight the Ukrainians on the border, but, destroy infrastructure deep inside Ukraine, pushing Ukraine's development back several decades. But as I said, the most likely kinetic element that you'll see will be escalations within Donbass and then, provocations, terror attacks, cyber attacks all around Ukraine. This will have the impact of causing casualties, tying down Ukrainian forces, and also influencing the West and the US in particular to look for any solution in which to end the fighting, to end the crisis. And this, I think, is the angle that the Russians are looking for. Creating a crisis that the West is desperate to solve without getting involved with their own troops or their own or risking their own territory, and thus they'll be willing to concede things that they weren't willing to concede before.
All right, then, security analyst Chidin Waunu, thank you so much for your thoughts on the program. Some updates on the COVID-19 pandemic now. Germany says the country's daily COVID cases could soon double to 400,000. An Indian capital lifts weekend curfew as Omicron wave slows. Here's more on these stories and others from around the world on our Global Update. Germany's health minister says the country has the wave of infections from the fast-spreading Omicron coronavirus variant well under control, and may consider lifting some restrictions after a peak in late February. The health ministry says the number of daily new infections could rise to 400,000, but would then drop again, adding that the protection of older people who have not been vaccinated is the country's most important task at the moment. India's capital, Delhi, has lifted a weekend curfew and is now allowing restaurants and marketplaces to reopen following a sharp drop in new infections of COVID-19. Under new orders, however, the city will remain under nighttime curfew and schools will be closed as government data suggests India's recent Omicron variant outbreak has slowed. The data shows the number of new cases in Delhi fell to 4,291 on January the 27th, from a peak of 28,867 on January the 13th. More than 85% of COVID beds across the city's hospitals are also unoccupied. North Korea has tightened epidemic prevention measures, with officials seen disinfecting barbershops in the capital, Pyongyang. Customers also have to undergo body temperature checks and adhere to social distancing. North Korea has not reported any cases of the coronavirus, but has imposed lockdowns and quarantines. The EU's drug regulator has given the green light to Pfizer Inc.'s antiviral COVID-19 pill for treating adults at risk of severe illness, as the region scrambles to boost its arsenal to fight the Omicron variant. The endorsement by the European Medicines Agency for a conditional approval, if followed as usual by the EU Commission, allows member states to deploy the drug after the regulator gave guidance for its emergency use late last year. Italy, Germany and Belgium are among a handful of EU countries that have bought the drug, branded as Paxlovid. We'll return in just a moment. Well, we visit China's smart canteen, where the food is cooked by robots. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. The UN World Food Programme is warning of extreme hunger in northern Ethiopia. For more than a year, aid agencies have been facing severe challenges delivering supplies to Ethiopia's Tigray region. No UN food convoy has reached Tigray since mid-December, but the WFP says 100 trucks a day are needed to prevent starvation.
More people are fleeing their homes due to continued fighting around the town of Abala in Afar province, near the boundary with Tigray province. The clashes are also preventing the delivery of assistance by the only available route into Tigray, with no supplies having arrived there since mid-December. In Tigray, we, along with our humanitarian partners, have been forced to scale back even more our operations due to the severe shortages of supply, the severe shortage of fuel and cash. Aid organizations have warned that operations could cease completely by the end of February. Nutrition supplies for supplementary feeding and treatment of severe acute malnutrition have already run out. Aid continues to be scaled up in areas of Amhara and Afar, which are accessible. More than 523,000 people received food in Amhara in the past week, with some 3.2 million men, women, and children have been reached with food assistance since last October. In Afar province, nearly 380,000 people have been reached this current round of food distribution.
West Africa's main regional bloc, ECOWAS, has suspended Burkina Faso over this week's military coup. In his opening remarks to a virtual summit, acting ECOWAS chairman and Ghana's president, Nana Akufo-Addo, said he hoped the meeting would find solutions to restore constitutional order to Burkina Faso and stabilize the region at large. Burkina Faso's army overthrew President Roch Kabore on Monday, presenting the latest test to the 15-member Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, which has struggled to mount an effective response to a series of coups in the region over the past 18 months.
The resurgence of coups d'etats in our region is in direct violation of our democratic tenets and represents a threat to peace, security, and stability in West Africa. This situation hinders the much-needed economic and social development of the region. I've convened this meeting with the hope to address the urgent situation in Burkina Faso and find solutions that will restore constitutional order to Burkina Faso and stabilize the region at large. We should not renege in our collective duties and obligations to ensure a peaceful, democratic, just, stable, and prosperous community. I urge you to examine critically this rising phenomenon in our region so that we take the necessary decisions that meet the aspirations and expectations of our peoples. The rest of the world is looking up to us to be firm in this matter.
Fighting corruption, they say, is everyone's business, but how to fight corruption becomes the question, as someone must take responsibility to lead. Religious leaders have stepped up. They are now teaming up with the U.S. consulate in Lagos, Nigeria, to launch a website called Report Mago-Mago to help make citizens' participation easier. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, reports.
Launch day is Friday morning, a day Muslim faithful gather to pray. But this Friday, leaders are gathered with their Christian counterparts alongside traditional rulers and civil society groups at the residence of the U.S. Consul General, Claire Pierangelo, for the launch of ReportMagoMago.com, an anti-corruption website to help citizens report on even the most insignificant corruption practices. In her opening remarks, the Consul General describes corruption as a virus.
Corruption is like a virus. We all know about viruses now. We've had a virus that we've been fighting for 2 years. Well, corruption is like a virus that we've been fighting a lot longer than that. It knows no boundaries, it cares not about religion, and it inherently destroys efforts to advance good governance and build strong democratic institutions.
Promoters of the website, Bishop Emmanuel Isong and Imam Shefio Majemu, speak on the mandate of the campaign.
In 2016, the former Secretary of State, Mr. John Kerry, brought about 200 religious leaders, 100 Muslims, 100 Christians, to fight corruption in Nigeria. And at the end of the day, we decided to take this up on our own, between me and Bishop, that look, this project must not die.
Many people in government who are corrupt, they came through the system by swearing to the Quran, by swearing to the Bible. Is there anywhere we can tell them either they stop swearing to the Quran and the holy books, or they do the right thing?
When it comes to the issue of corruption, people tend to point fingers at political leaders whom they want to keep accountable. Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly, Right Honourable Mudashiru Obasa, says promoting constitutional institutions would help greatly.
We need to promote our institutions, particularly democratic institutions. When you don't promote your institution, it will become weak. And when it is weak, there's nothing we can achieve.
The portal, created by Dr. Kazim Drodoye of ZMAC Hybrid Solutions, provides easy navigation for uploading of evidence in form of pictures or videos, so that members of the Interreligious Coalition Against Corruption in Nigeria can examine and reroute to relevant law enforcement authorities for investigation and action.
Lots of white background, so it's easy to capture the information, not heavy graphics, so the page loads very fast. The forms are very simple to fill, and you can simply attach any incident that you feel is not right into that form and send it, boom, as an email.
Tracking the website's progress will be done quarterly, before a general review 1 year later. Citizens are encouraged to explore the opportunity to help make Nigeria a corruption-free society. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
And finally on the program, China's smart canteen for the upcoming Winter Olympics is fascinating visitors with its robot chefs and automatic meal delivery system designed to improve efficiency and minimize in-person contact. The kitchen is located in the main media center in downtown Beijing. Using a system of ceiling-based tracks, meals are automatically carried from the kitchen and lowered to the table. Dumplings, kung pao chicken, pot rice and other Chinese food are among the most popular choices, which are cooked not by human chefs but by their robot counterparts. In addition to cooking Chinese dishes, the robot chefs can also make hamburgers, pizzas and even cocktails.
This is the first time. I ordered the chicken Szechuan, sauteed chicken Szechuan pepper.
The food is great. Great. Came out piping hot.
Fascinating actually watching the robot too make it, clean, and deliver it to the table. It's quite interesting.
I'm very curious as to how that tastes. Well, you can go to China to check it out. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenyola Shiboale. Bye for now.